All right, well, let's take a look at a few news articles while I wait for people to get here. Someone has written a three-part series on pen testing APIs with Burp, which is just what I'm starting to do in the 129S class. So I'll go through this and see what parts of it are useful. First part is using Postman and Burp together, which we've already got. So I guess they agree generally how to do it, and I'll see what I can find here to add more projects. API testing is a big focus this semester in that class. Saudi Arabia has decided for some reason to dump a ton of crude oil onto a market that is already saturated, driving the price down. This is due to some kind of disagreement with Russia. In the 70s, for the old people like me that remember, Jimmy Carter had an oil crisis to deal with because the Arab countries formed an alliance, OPEC, and they stuck together and they carefully controlled the supply to drive the price high, which would seem to be the logical thing to do. But for some reason, Saudi Arabia has chosen to dump a ton of oil onto the market and depress the price. I don't know why, but it does have the effect of pushing the stock market even lower at this time when it's falling. And the stock market fell the highest amount it has ever fallen in a single day. Yeah.
I think it's because Russia agreed to cut back their oil.
Yeah, that would probably be it. Yeah, Russia wouldn't cut back theirs. Right, so this is the only way they can get some. Yeah, okay, thank you. That could be. Anyway, the stock market fell in the largest single day loss ever, although to be fair, it is at the highest level ever. So percentage is probably more important, but falling 7% in a single day is also really bad. And, you know, when this first started happening about a week ago, I thought maybe this would be the thing that gets rid of Trump. And then I remembered I've thought that 100 times. But I always thought that the one thing that would really end Trump is if the stock market stopped being up. But I do not think that has happened yet. If you just go to Google and you look at the Dow Jones Industrial Average, it gives you a nice chart and it's fallen some, but if you look at 5 years, then here's Trump getting in and it goes up and there was a dip here, and this is still just a normal sized dip. I don't think this will be the end of Trump yet. If it continues to fall down to here, say, then Trump might lose the election. But I would think the most likely thing is the coronavirus will finish in about 3 months like it did in China. That seems to be its natural progression. And then the stock market will come up, and seeing as it's only March, it'll be April, May, June. By July and August, the stock market will go up again, and this will all be forgotten, and Trump may well get reelected, because I think many political scientists have found that the only thing that matters about a president getting reelected is the stock market. Is the rate, is actually there's a certain economic number called personal disposable income. And if that goes up by something like 2% in the year before the election, then the president gets reelected. That is what really determines whether people feel good about things in America. Anyway, so we'll see what happens, but nobody knows if it'll really end in 3 months, of course. We don't know much about it. So you can't get hand sanitizer. It all sold out long ago. People are selling it for ridiculous amounts on secondary markets like eBay. So Andrew Cuomo, the New York mayor, has decided to get convicts to make it. By the way, my sister told me she just made her own batch. All you need is isopropyl alcohol and aloe, and you mix them together. Anyway, so they're making their own New York brand coronavirus and using it in the prisons and other New York state offices. So that's one option. Apparently it's not that hard to make your own. I think like 3/4 any kind of alcohol and like 1/4 aloe, and that's it. Aloe vera gel, just to be gentler to your hands. That's what I know. Various blog posts out with recommended recipes. Apparently that's all it is. And you can get, apparently even though the hand sanitizer is sold out, you can still get the alcohol of which it's made, because people don't know how to make it. Anyway, so Vincent Taviso, who is one of the most important hackers in the world, he found a ton of vulnerabilities. He works for Google. He found a bunch of Microsoft vulnerabilities. He found, he also has been spending the last 5 years hacking antivirus products like crazy and finding that they are typically very badly made. Nobody else ever looked into them, I think. And so he really found vulnerabilities. So he found that a vast antivirus is running a background service as system, which is the highest privileges. And that service takes code, untrusted code from website JavaScript, and runs it as system. So he doesn't get so far as to actually show a specific privilege escalation or something, but it certainly sounds like you could very easily do anything to do privilege escalation. So anyway, as is fairly common from these highly technical hackers, he hands out a tool, publishes a website, and I can't really understand a word of it. We need some dumber person to write a demonstration of it doing something. A lot of people are saying, oh, what does this mean? It looks like it means you can run anything from website as system, but there ought to be a proof of concept, you know, like changing a password or something for a website or something. And I guess that's coming, or else maybe there's some reason why you can't quite do it as much. Anyway, it's an interesting issue, and some people are already yelling at him, like, why did you dump this without telling him first, which he's been accused of before. Mentioned TV show has been criticized seriously before for dumping things without bothering to tell the vendor. But anyway, I assume there will be more news coming after this as everybody jumps on it and tries using it and figures out what it means, which I don't really know. Anyway, so Walgreens has their private messaging in their mobile app. I did tested a lot of medical apps, and they tend to have terrible messaging. I found a bunch of medical apps that just send plain text with no encryption at all over the internet. But when I reported them, the lawyers from those companies said that is perfectly legal. That does not violate HIPAA, because HIPAA only covers communication between health providers and insurance companies, and it does not cover communication between individual patients and their doctors. And it's perfectly fine to send that with no encryption or broken encryption. And I said, I still don't like it, but as far as I can tell, that is what the law says. I'm not a lawyer. So I stopped reporting them. But anyway, they found a vulnerability in their so-called secure message service. One thing I think is if you do advertise your message as secure and then it's not secure, you could probably get busted by the FTC for that. Those are guys I used to work for. Then you are just not living up to your claims, and it doesn't have to go through HIPAA. Anyway, so we'll see what comes of that. And maybe if I figure out how to get it working, maybe I'll throw that in the mobile hacking course. The other thing I'm going to throw in the mobile hacking course is this, already started playing with this Iranian product. Iran published a coronavirus app, which, there it is. They published an official COVID-19 detection app, which I think asks you a series of questions to decide if you're sick and then tells you if you're sick. And now the most extreme is in China, where they have this app that shows like red, green, or yellow, and it determines for you whether you're infected and you can't ride the subway or anything if it turns red, and they will figure out by their decision whether it turns red, like somebody in your building is sick or no apparent reason at all. But this, I think, just works from a quiz. But what they're claiming is it's spyware, and it sends all your data back to the government without telling you, and everyone's freaking out. But they say it's not exactly malware, but it is from a really suspicious developer that made a bunch of obvious malware products in the past. So anyway, it's pretty awesome, but I went and got it. You can easily download it. I downloaded it, stuck it on my phone. It doesn't do much. I kind of suspect it detects that I'm not in Iran, so I tried to run a VPN to Iran, but they're, strangely enough, they're running the endpoints in Iran, my VPN, and I tried to go to the UAE, and that wasn't close enough. So I'm doing static analysis by sending it up to virus total and stuff, so I'll play with it and see if I can figure out how to make it do something fun. I would like to see it sending personal data to the server or something, but anyway, it's AC19, and you can't get it from the Google Play Store anymore. They took it off, but you can get it straight from Iran. They mentioned it towards the end. All you have to go to is like ac19.ir, something like that. You can go right to the Iranian website and download it straight from there. Yeah, ac19.ir. Then I ran it through Google Translate so I could find the download button. And I downloaded it straight from Iran, stuck it on my emulated phone, and didn't do much. But anyway, you can totally get it and play with it. A lot of colleges are talking about canceling classes, including this one. Our college made an official statement today that they're open today, but they are waiting for one student to be found to test positive, and then they'll freak out and cancel, is what I expect. And so my department chair sent me an email demanding that I today tell them whether I can somehow continue without physical presence in the classroom. And I said, yes, obviously, all my classes are ready to go that way. As we did when I was sick a couple weeks ago, you folks will just, very few people come to the class anyway. If they close the place, we'll just keep going and do it all by Zoom, and it won't really be much different. And if I'm able to sneak in and open the lab, I might do that, but we'll see what they say. They might lock the door and panic about it all. But actually, I think coming to class is pretty safe because so few people come. But anyway, however, there are other classes that fill this room. So technically, they might all be coughing in here and leaving germs around. Anyway, so that's the story. We are here. It's in at 1:25. And I think today is the day that you can do talks with a penalty for being late. So people did presentations. This is 3/9, yes. So does anybody want to do a presentation today? Nobody screaming out? You do, okay, good. What's your name? Dan, right, okay, good. Let me make a list. All right, so Dan. All right, and these are presentations today. All right, and if anybody online wants to do a presentation, send a chat message. All right, and if you think of it later, that's all right, because we got a lecture to go through anyway. I just wanted to get a clue how many, and it seems like there won't be too many. All right, so let's talk about the rest of security engineering. We may not get through all this because the next sections are cryptography, and this is the same crypto you see in Security Plus and CEH and everywhere. This is just the basic crypto stuff. I'm writing yet another crypto course, and they're all the same. I mean, the same basic concepts you always have to know. So this is hopefully a review of stuff you already know. So there was this Spartan Scytale, which is a transposition cipher, where you rearrange the letters without changing any letters. You just write the letters, and then you wrap it around this stick and read it the other way. So the end result is you're reading like every fifth letter, and then the other. So it scrambles the letters. And you could decrypt it the other end by wrapping it around a stick with the same shape. Caesar used the substitution cipher, where you would move everything forward a couple letters in the alphabet. Microsoft uses ROT13, where you move everything forward 13 letters in the alphabet, and so on. This is ROT3. ROT13 is the one that moves it forward 13 letters, so if you do it again, it undoes itself. These are all very simple systems, very insecure, of course. They're not going to hide anything from a modern attacker, but in a time, this was military-grade encryption 2,500 years ago when very few people could read at all, and anything to make it a little harder to read was enough to mean nobody could read it. The Vigenere square is a much stronger one, where you have a key word that you repeat over and over, like apple, 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 and you use the first one you scramble with the A alphabet, and then you use the P alphabet, and then the L, and then the E, and that's the point. You use a different alphabet for each letter in the key. So this is the equivalent of many different transposition ciphers, really many different Caesar ciphers. And if your key is long, this is much stronger than a single Caesar cipher, although not all that strong. And here's a cipher disk from the Cryptologic Museum, which when I was a kid was the Captain Crunch magic decoder ring. You rotate the thing in the front and the thing on the side, and you can create a Caesar cipher with a little mechanical gadget. And the Confederates used this. This is an official Confederate Army cipher disk, which uses the same principle. These are simple ways to encrypt things in the days before computers. All right, so a book cipher is another one where you just take a series of numbers, and this is the page number, paragraph number, and word number in some book. And then you take those. And so there's no way to crack it at all unless you can guess what book they're using, and they have to have exactly the same book at the other end. So, and then there's a running key cipher, which is one I mentioned, where you really use some kind of like we the people use some kind of phrase as the key, and that so you'd have to guess that phrase, we the people. And the best one of this is the one-time pad. We'll get to the absolutely unbreakable perfect cipher. It's been around for centuries. All right, so you can have code books. This is another trick that originally used by a lot of people, used by the British Navy with flags, used by all the companies in the days of telegraphs, just to make telegrams shorter because they were expensive. You'd have codes, and the Secret Service has names for everybody. Brock is Renegade, Hillary Clinton is Evergreen, and so on. I think Bill Clinton was Bubba, and I don't know what they call Trump, but it's well known. For some reason, I don't know why they bother with these because everybody knows them. But anyway, they have code words for things. The one-time pad is the perfect cipher, and this is important to know because this is what they're all trying to do. The one-time pad is just page after page of random letters, and you scramble each letter of the message with one letter from the pad, and you cross them off, and you never use any part of the pad again. And so if you could somehow get the whole pad to somebody else, it is completely unbreakable because there is no pattern at all in the ciphertext. There's no mathematical pattern. There's no key. There's no nothing. The only problem is you have to somehow securely distribute a key that is as long as all the total messages you're ever going to send. And that turned out to be so difficult that it's almost never used. The Russian army used it in World War II. And what is this garbage? This is probably my stinking attempt to lock people out who are hacking into my, yep, my Mac has been locked. Well, that's rude. I didn't want my Mac to be locked. So how about unlock? Right. I cannot figure out how to unlock my Mac. This is what you get for security. This is the stinking lock app, but it doesn't have any unlock. There's the unlock option. Good. Yes. Okay, it's supposed to unlock. I say unlock. and it doesn't work. Neat. Well, there will now be a pause. I guess I have to force shut down my machine. Yeah, I turned on this locking thing and it worked for several days. And now it seems to have utterly, oh, there, it finally knocked it off. Well, that's rude. Yep, I wasn't too happy with it. Anyway, so that's the game here. So let's see what's going on here. All right, so one-time pad would be fine. And really all the rest of the systems like AES and DES and everything are a way to try to create a one-time pad or something close to it with some kind of mathematical process to create a pseudo-random series of bits, which is an approximation to a one-time pad. So KGB used one-time pads in the 40s, but they ran out of them and they actually started using extra sheets of carbon paper to make more copies of the one-time pad. And one thing about the one-time pad is if you use it twice, it shatters like glass. It becomes so weak you can crack it without a computer. And we do that in a cryptography class. Anyway, so there is machines that look like manual typewriters, and they're like Enigma, where it would have a bunch of gears that do some kind of encryption and decryption. Enigma is the one the Nazis used. And so there have been laws. The United States government has a general feeling that there is a system called NOBUS. Nobody but us should be able to decrypt things. And that means they want to have an encryption routine that nobody can get into except the US government. The US government wants to have some backdoor way in. That is their goal. So they have rules to make it illegal to export cryptography, which are still in place. The first version of them were so bad, they made a lot of trouble. In the late 90s, they passed the Wassenaar Arrangement, which made it less difficult to export cryptographic products. Before that, Microsoft couldn't even export copies of Windows that were up to date. They had to have special weakened versions of Windows to send to other countries that are hostile. Now they made a deal to at least knock that off, but it's still limited in many ways, and I was not able to teach my cryptography class in China by our current restrictions. Anyway, so here's the basic types. There's 3 types of cryptographies that matter to just normal computer security issues. Symmetric encryption, the classic old kind where you have a key and the person at the other end has to have the same key. Asymmetric, where you don't have to distribute a secret key at all because everybody has a key pair, a private key and a public key. And hashing, which is not encryption, but just a way to put a thumbprint on a file so you can tell if the file has been modified. All it provides is integrity, not confidentiality. So symmetric encryption, you have this secret key, you have to distribute the key somehow to the other person. So now you have this oxymoron called a shared secret where 2 people have a secret and you have no way to know if the other person has lost the secret or let someone make an extra copy. And that's the weakness of it, is key distribution. But if your enemy does not get a copy of the key, then this system can be plenty secure. Stream ciphers encrypt a stream of data 1 bit at a time with a stream of bits. This is what WEP does in RC4. Block ciphers are where you have a block of data like 128 bits and you encrypt 1 block at a time with the key. The only difference in practice is that you have to add padding to block ciphers if your input stream data is not exactly the right length. So initialization vector is added to plaintext before encryption. This helps prevent a flaw we're going to see in electronic codebook mode. And chaining is where you take the output of 1 block to make the next block encryption more random. The DES was the first official US government standard for encryption, and all the basic ideas of encryption were defined here. And when this was later replaced by AES, all the modes were continued. So IBM invented a very strong algorithm called Lucifer, and without any explanation, the government weakened it to 56 bits. This is almost certainly because they couldn't crack a 128-bit key, and they deliberately weakened it to something that they could crack, but nobody else could. Because remember, the intelligence agencies do not want us to have strong encryption. They want us to be protected from bad guys and criminals, but not from our own government. So they're trying to hit that sweet spot of NOBUS, nobody but us. So here's the 5 modes of DES: electronic codebook, cipher block chaining, and these other ones, which are very similar to cipher block chaining. Electronic codebook is what you call textbook encryption. You take blocks of input, encrypt them with the key, and get blocks of output. And then you take the next block, encrypt it with the key, get the next block of output, that's it. The problem is if 2 blocks of input are identical, the blocks of output will be identical. So if you encrypt this apple, you get that apple because the blocks of solid color just turn into different blocks of solid color. And that's the problem with electronic codebook. Some patterns in the input are preserved in the output. So this is why the general mode people like is cipher block chaining, where you add an initialization vector to the first block, you XOR it in, and then you take the output of the first block as the IV for the next block, and the output of that block as the IV for the next block, and that creates random snow. No more information at all, which is what you would expect encryption to do. No information is left that you can see at all. All right. Single DES was the original version. They just called it DES at that time. This was a single 56-bit key. The main weakness of it is that 56 bits is just not long enough. And as computers got faster, by 1997, you could take a group of computers across the internet, 10,000 servers worked together for like 3 months, and they were able to try all possible keys. And so that after that, Electronic Frontier Foundation in San Francisco was able to break it in 3 days with special hardware. And they showed that 56 is just really not long enough at all. 2 to the 56, you can try that many keys. So this is not trusted anymore. And so the next step up is triple DES. Use 2 or 3 different 56-bit keys, and the end result is this has an effective strength of 112 bits. That is considered perfectly fine. Nobody knows any way to crack this by brute force, but it's slower to compute than AES. AES is generally preferred. The only point of triple DES was to improve hardware designed for single DES as sort of a temporary measure, like while you wait for people to buy new hardware that can do AES. The same thing is true, by the way, of WPA1. It was a small move to improve the security of WEP as a temporary stopgap measure until you could move forward to WPA2. So I think I've got to figure out how to turn off this stupid locking thing, which is hit unlock, recognizes my face, and it still doesn't work. And if I do a lot of nonsense, all right, I will turn it off. If I ever get back, I will figure out how to turn it off. There should be some stupid icon somewhere. This hogwash. Right. Well, what happens if I turn Bluetooth off? That should do something, either lock me out forever or make this thing stop working. All right, anyway, we'll carry on. This is an attempt to make my, anyway, if anybody knows any way to make a Mac automatically lock when you walk away from it, I would really like to find one. I can't find any app that does it at all. And I really need it because Caitlin stole my passwords, and it's happened before. And I really need something that automatically locks it when I'm in the classroom. Yeah.
Is it locking under your security and privacy? Is it like from the titles?
Well, sure, I can lock it whenever I'm not touching it, but then it'll keep blacking out in the middle of lecture. Yeah. I need it to recognize my physical presence. Oh, okay. And when I walk away, I need it to turn off. And this app sort of does it, but it's too long range. And as you can see, it's too buggy. I can't find any solution. I must not be the only person on earth with this problem, but there doesn't seem to be anything, even if you'll pay for it, that will work. I'm thinking I'll have to write my own. Anyway, all right, so IDEA is another one, which is not approved as the official AES, but it's considered quite secure. And AES is the main one. There was a competition of several encryption routines, one to be picked to be AES. This is the one that won. Has 128-bit, 192, and 256-bit versions. And it is considered very secure, and it's what everybody should be using for symmetric keys, unless you have some very good reason not to. This is the American standard, and as far as anybody knows, it's very good. Here's the other finalists, in case you care. Serpent, Twofish, RC6, and Mars were the runners-up from other companies like IBM and stuff. And as far as anybody knows, they're all perfectly fine. U.S. government just chose one that they thought was the best and gave it the stamp of approval as the official advanced encryption standard. So if you are suspicious of the government and you don't like government-approved things, thinking they probably snuck a backdoor into it, you might want to use one of these others, like Serpent or Twofish, which is strong but not officially approved by the government. Anyway. It has all the process is just a bunch of simple substitutions. You substitute bytes, you shift the rows around, you mix the columns, you add a round key, you XOR some stuff. You just go around several rounds of that. It's just these little transformations in a particular combination that scrambles up the data and unscrambles it at the other end. Blowfish and Twofish were developed by Bruce Schneier, without a D, a very famous cryptographer. And again, they're considered very strong. And one good thing about them is you can have many different key sizes. So you can test brute force attacks at various key sizes if you like. That's another one of the, these are considered perfectly fine, but they didn't win the stamp of approval as AES. RC5 and RC6 are also out there with varying sizes and plenty strong enough. And then there's asymmetric encryption. This all came about, the US military had it for probably decades in top secret classification, but it was independently reinvented in the unclassified world by Whitfield Diffie and Hellman, and they published it. And this is the idea that you can use prime number multiplication to agree upon a key without ever directly sending the key over the wire. You send other numbers over the wire, which are then multiplied together to create a key at each end, but the number that went over the wire is only distantly related to the key. So this is the basic principle of public key encryption. You can have a private key, and well, now I'm really getting bad. Even when my Bluetooth turned off, it is still somehow locking my machine. Now my face is not recognized. Well, I've never had this problem before. I don't see Caitlin. I would assume she's trying to hack me and messing it up, but I can't blame it on her. So turning Bluetooth off didn't do it. I think if it keeps on happening, I'm going to have to somehow find this app and get rid of it. Just a moment. Let me try to go to my applications folder. It's called Easy Unlock or something. And I need to like uninstall it, obviously, or kill it. That's a violation of availability. It is absolutely a violation of availability. So there's something called unlock. There it is, unlock. So if I throw it away, can't be moved because it's open. All right, how do you kill it? Let's go to force quit and find it. And it's not there. Right. Right, this is probably some idiot's idea of security. I'll give one more try before we knock this off. Let's try the command line. CD, CD I say. Okay, then let's try top, PS, box. All right. Pipe, grep, lock. Okay, there it is. So sudo kill -9 19185. That's correct. No such process. Oh, it's this one. It's 4200. Okay, now I can supposedly throw it away. And it went. All right, so supposedly it will stop dying on me and I'll forget that. That's useless. And I need to hunt more. I hunted for like hours and I can't find any product anywhere that works. Anyway, all right. So we talked about asymmetric encryption. And the point here is you make a public and private key, you publish the public key. Anybody can send secrets to you with the public key and only you can open them because you hold the private key. And you never share the private key with anybody. So you have a secret and you're the only one that knows it, and that is much more sustainable than sharing a secret. So it relies upon having a one-way function. You must be able to calculate the public key from the private key, but it must be impossible for someone to take the public key and deduce your private key from it. That's the issue. And so it all relies on this vague, unproven mathematical concept of a one-way function. And unfortunately, there are no mathematical proofs that our one-way functions are really one-way. We just go on the belief that they appear to be one way. All this public key encryption is resting on somewhat shaky mathematics. So the one-way functions we use, the Diffie-Hellman uses factoring prime a large number. The product of two primes is very hard to factor back into the primes it came from. A general version of the same thing using set theory is the discrete logarithm problem. And elliptic curves have another one. And those are getting very popular because the keys are much smaller and the calculations are much faster. And as far as anybody can tell, it is as secure. So in general, symmetric keys are much smaller and the symmetric algorithms are much faster. Asymmetric crypto is long. Let's see if I can get this somebody's webcam on. Anyway, so all right, so this is something that confused me at first. 128 is an uncrackable AES key, but for RSA, you need 2048 or 3072 bits. Which confused me at first, but that's the way it is. Your asymmetric algorithms need much longer keys. Elliptic curves only need to be about twice as long. 256 bits of elliptic key is about as good as 128 bits of AES, and discrete logarithm is essentially the same as RSA. So the RSA algorithm was the first one, and it's much, much slower, like 10 or 100 times slower than symmetric encryption. Elliptic curve is much faster. So it's highly preferred these days for that reason. All right, hash functions take all the bytes and combine them to form a hash. The earliest one was just a checksum that counted the total number of bits. And for parity, it determined whether the total number of ones was either even or odd. And then you have MD5, was very popular, but it was never very secure. SHA-1 was trusted very much until a couple of years ago, until Google found a collision, two different files that hashed to the same thing. So the current favorite is SHA-2. As far as anybody knows, SHA-2 is great and should be good for a really long time, but in case it ever fails, we do have something called SHA-3 to use and another one called HAVAL. There are various ones, but the current one everybody has been using is SHA-1, and they're all hastily upgrading to SHA-2 because SHA-1 now has a known defect. So collisions, you should not be able to find any two files that hash to the same value. In principle, they always exist, but they should be so rare that even if you hunt for them with all the computers in the world, with all the time in the world, you'll never find them. And that is not true, even of SHA-1. Google actually found a SHA-1 collision by running a long search for them. So now everybody is moving to SHA-2. All right. I've got a few hash functions about that, or cahoots about that, rather. So 3G is here. All right, and what is this garbage? Okay. All right, and this is going to be CNIT 25. All right. All right, we only got a few people online, a few in the room. I think about 8 is the most I can expect. Maybe not even that. I'll give it a few more seconds. Anybody in the room still coming in? No screams of protest. Forward we go. All right. So, which mode preserves some patterns? Okay, electronic codebook. All right. And what's the weakest scheme on this list? Right. Can you turn that off? All right. Yes, DES is the weakest thing on that list. All right. And all right. All right, which of these is the strongest? The one-time pad is essentially perfect, except for the key distribution problem, which is a big problem. All right. And which one encrypts bits one at a time? All right, that's a stream cipher. All right. And which process has no key? All right, that's hashing. All right. And which one is popular on mobile devices? Elliptic curve because it saves battery power. All right. So all right, those look like real names. All right. Hopefully this thing will stop blacking out and we can carry on here. All right. So brute force attacks, if you have a very good encryption routine, then the only attack you can still use is a brute force attack, where you get to try every possible key. This will break almost any encryption scheme with the exception of the one-time pad. The one-time pad, if you try brute force attack, you will create every possible message. A bunch of them will be readable. Most of the time, they're all unreadable except for the right one, but the one-time pad will even withstand a brute force attack. All the others, however, you can try all the keys, so you make the key long enough that there's not enough time to try them all, and 128 bits for symmetric key is enough that all the computers in the world and all the time in the world couldn't try enough keys. Social engineering is, of course, awesome. Just trick people into handing over the secret. The #1 attack of all kinds. Rainbow tables is called the time memory trade-off attack, where you do some of the math calculations and you store the result in RAM. And now you can try all the keys more quickly because instead of doing all the calculation, you just look up the answer. This was quite popular in the days of Windows XP with the old landman hashes. The later hashing algorithms are more complicated, and this becomes impractical because you can't afford to buy enough RAM to make a big enough rainbow table to help you very much. What's better these days is to use a GPU to just get a lot of processors and just do a lot of fast calculations that way, instead of trying to store pre-calculated hashes in RAM. A known plain text is very nice if you can guess some part of the message. Webcracks did this because a lot of network traffic is art packets, and they're easy to identify because they're short, and many bits of art packets are always the same. So you do, in fact, know some of the plain text, and that often makes it easier to deduce the key from observing the ciphertext. You can have a chosen plain text attack too if you have a system where you're able to feed in data of your choice, and it will then encrypt it. And this is what padding oracles attack does, and also beast and crime and other attacks, mainly against HTTPS. There are a series of attacks that work in the situation where you can choose the plain text. Meet in the middle is a technique where, for example, if you wanted to crack double DES, 2 DES encryptions with different keys, if you just tried to calculate it straight through, you'd have 112 bits of security. But what you do is you do an encryption and calculate the one encryption of DES, and you store all 2 to the 56 answers in RAM, and then you take the result and do a decryption with keys until you find one that matches. So that's called meet in the middle. Instead of having to try 2 to the 112 keys, you only have to do 2 to the 56 keys twice. So that's why double DES is no stronger than single DES. And that's why the next step up is triple DES, where one of those steps will still involve 112 keys. That's called the meet in the middle attack, and it means that doubling a key size doesn't always do as much good as you think it should. All right, then there's known key. Often you know something about a key. Like if you guess passwords, people don't really have random passwords. They choose them off familiar words and stuff in their known password dictionaries. So you don't really have to try all combinations of letters. There's a much smaller list you can look at that will probably find the key. And differential cryptanalysis is a technique where you encrypt 2 plain texts that differ just a little bit, and many cryptographic systems lack sufficient dispersion, is the technical term for this, so that a small change in the plain text results in something other than totally random changes in the output. And you can therefore deduce something about the key if you can do closely related plain text and observe what happens. And side channel attacks are extremely common, where you get the key by something in the hardware that people didn't think of, like the time of the calculation depends on the key, the power consumption, the emitted radio waves, many other things can be used to deduce information about the key. Even if there's nothing wrong with the math, there's something wrong with the hardware implementation that leaks secrets out. And these are implementation techniques. Another thing, sometimes they leave the plain text in RAM or on the hard drive or something. Again, an implementation flaw where there is some way to get the key without really having to break the math. The birthday attack is similar to the meet in the middle attack. If you might think that an MD5 hash that's 128 bits long would be secure because you can't do 2 to the 128 calculations, but it's not because of the birthday attack. If you just start calculating hashes, the same thing as this. If you're in a room with 23 people, you might think you don't have very many birthdays there, but you have 23 times 22 pairs of birthdays. So if you want to ask what's the chance that 2 students have the same birthday, it's more than 50% as soon as you have 23 people. And so if you just make a table of hashes, once you get up to the square root of the number of possible hashes, you'll find a collision. So 128 bits will have a collision after only 2 to the 64 calculations. And so that's why you need a much longer hash to be secure. All right, so implementing cryptography, digital signatures are the official technique used to do finance online, approved by the Digital Millennium Copyright Act under the Carter administration. So you have a message saying something like, I've mortgaged my house and I'll pay you $100 a month or $1,000 a month, or you get to take it back. This is not a secret message necessarily. It can be a public message, but you want to sign it. So you calculate a hash, then you encrypt it with your private key, and that's the digital signature. Anybody that wants to verify it can decrypt it with your public key and verify that the hash matches, and that means that you signed it, because only the holder of the private key could create a message which would decrypt with the public key, and it means it has not been altered, or this hash function wouldn't work. So you can sign something online with this system, and you can be held to it just as much as if you took a pen and a piece of paper and signed to it. You do not have, this provides non-repudiation. You cannot deny that you signed it later, because you are the only person holding this private key. That's the idea of the system. So the person verifying it takes the encryption, takes the final message, calculates the SHA-1, then they take the digital signature and decrypt it and compare these two. And if they match, then that proves it is what you signed and you are the person that signed it. So that's the digital signature standard. Message authentication codes are the general way of putting some kind of mark on a message to make sure it can be verified. And so they can use any kind of cryptography, some kind of cryptography and some kind of hashing. CBC MAC uses the CBC mode of DES. HMAC is one that uses MD5 or SHA-1 with a shared secret. These are often used for financial transactions. You send an order to a bank, like a money order, and it has a HMAC attached to it, which verifies that it came from an authorized sender and it hasn't been altered. The public key infrastructure is what we use to make secure connections on the internet. It's a bunch of commercial entities, and a few of them are public public service entities, like Let's Encrypt, that run a bunch of servers, and they have these public keys signed to the digital signature on the server that forms a digital certificate. So when you go to a place like Google, Google gives you a digital certificate. You then verify it with a trusted third party, like DigiCert or something, and then you believe that you really are talking to Google because a trusted third party has vouched for them. It's just as good as an ID card that the government gives you to prove who you are. So you have certificate authorities that issue the certificates. You got registration authorities that authenticate users. People that hold certificates, usually servers, can sign things. And then clients validate certificates and so on. You have online lists of valid certificates, places to verify them, and lists of invalid certificates, like the certificate revocation list, so you can know which ones have been compromised and canceled. That system, by the way, does not work very well, but anyway, that's where we are. So you got key management issues are a big issue. You have to keep your private key and not lose it, or you won't be able to read the messages coming to you, and therefore you have to back it up. But if you back it up, then somebody else has it. So what a lot of people do is key escrow, or where they put only a third of the key here, a third of the key here, and a third of the key here, so the other people can't use it, that sort of thing. There's a lot of systems to try to safely back up secrets. All right, and then you got SSL was the original system developed by Netscape when there was no encryption at all on the internet. They invented the first version of this system. That has been old and broken and is now replaced by TLS in various versions. That's all anybody uses. Nobody's using SSL anymore, but a lot of people in a sort of slang language call the system SSL because that was its original name. And I see a chat message coming in. Transport layer security, that's right. Is it something else here? Oh, transport, thank you. Good. All right. So there's an SSL handshake. If you want to connect to a web server, you send a SYN to 443, you get a SYN ACK, and then you send an ACK. Now you have a TCP socket going to 443. You can send data, but it won't be encrypted. So then you send a client hello, and the server acknowledges it. Then the server sends you a server hello, and the server hello, the client hello says, I can speak. Then you tell it what encryption methods your client supports, and the server chooses one and says, okay, let's use this one. So then the server sends you a certificate, you send that off someplace and verify it. Then you do a key exchange and you get a session ticket. And at the end of all this, you have now agreed on a protocol to use, verified the server's identity with a third party, and now you can send encrypted data back and forth. It's quite a complicated job to set up these secure connections, much more than just a simple TCP socket. IPsec is a technique of encryption invented for IP version 6 and considered so valuable it was backported to IP version 4. It is extremely complex with far more modes than it needs. Bruce Schneier has said they ought to just knock it off and kill it all except the most secure mode. Why would you use anything else anyway? But it has all these other modes. It has an authentication header, encapsulating security payload, ISACamp, and IKE. It's a real alphabet soup of pieces. There's an authentication header that gives you authentication and integrity, but no confidentiality. It's like a digital signature. And then there's ESP, which is more like what you want. It encrypts the data in the packet, so you have confidentiality. And anyway, the way this works is you make security associations between two devices, one going one way and one going the other way, sort of like that public key exchange for HTTPS. And that's managed by this ISACamp protocol that makes the security associations. And there's a tunnel mode and a transport mode. Tunnel mode is what you would normally want to use that encrypts the whole packet, including the headers. Transport mode encrypts the data, but not the headers, because you still need the address to make it to the server. All right. And IKE is the internet key exchange used by IPsec. From a viewpoint of CISSP, all you really have to know is that all these algorithms go with IPsec, because it's really quite baffling and confusing, and very few people understand it. I don't really understand it. It's just pretty mind-boggling. It is considered, however, very secure. One of the most secure VPN protocols that you can get now is L2TP IPsec. L2TP to deliver the data and IPsec to encrypt it. It is considered quite good. All right, PGP is an encryption technique to encrypt email and hard drives invented by Phil Zimmerman in 1991. This turned out to be very problematic for him because the US government regarded it as exporting dangerous weapons to enemies, and he had a lot of trouble for years. One thing he had was they didn't have certificate authorities. He wanted you to get away from paying anybody for anything or trusting anybody. So you had a public key, and the only reason you trust a public key is one of your friends vouched for that guy. You were supposed to have a friend of a friend of a friend who actually knew that guy. So you could sign a key signing parties, and other people had key signing parties, and you would decide how many layers deep friend of a friend you trust, instead of having any certificate authority you trusted anymore. That is very strange, and that means basically nobody would use it except security professionals who kind of all know each other. Normal people don't have any access to a web of trust when they're talking on the internet, so most people use the certificate authority system. I saw a server that used IP to create a tunnel, and otherwise all the ports look closed. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. Hey there, you're all right, Caitlin. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, you can totally make a tunnel, a VPN tunnel, and use it for a lot of things. Anyway, so SMIME is a way to attach attachments in email, because email is an ASCII-only medium. So if you want to send a binary file, you have to encode it. SMIME is another technique that uses PKI to encrypt it. And there was this system called escrowed encryption, which was the US government has always wanted to hold all the encryption keys, and they have many repetitive protocols to do this. That would be escrowed encryption, where an extra copy of your key goes to the government to hold. This is actually supported by some versions of Windows Server. They put it in because it looked like the government was going to pass that law, so they anticipated by having a feature where it sends an extra copy of your key to a third party all the time. This never became required in America. They did try to sneak it in by manufacturing this clipper chip thing, which would do the escrowed encryption standard, but they were not successful in getting people to use it, and it turned out to be insecure and broken and everything, and was one of the many, many salvos in the crypto wars, which have been going on for decades, as the government keeps trying to force us to use broken encryption, and the cryptographers keep shaming them and beating them back. Steganography is a covert channel. Now, all the things we talked about so far are not secret. You encrypt something, you send some traffic, and people can see that you are sending traffic. And they can see how many total bytes you're sending, they just can't read it. But a covert channel is where nobody even knows you sent a message at all. And steganography, terrorist groups use this. They hide messages in pictures on public picture repositories like whatever they are, IMGUR, and there are other ones used by people, I don't know modern names. And then, take the 15th cat from this search and look in there, and you'll find your instructions for today, and nobody will see it unless they know to look for it. So you hide data inside a file. Another version of it puts a watermark in a file, so you can tell if somebody's stealing your movie or music. All right, So you got some 3H, and I think that's as far as we're going to go today. There is a little bit more to this chapter, but I think it gets kind of deadening. And we've got enough time, so we'll be all right to just cover 2 pieces of it today. So I'm here. And yeah.
I got a question. For the chapters and stuff, is there a way to have the page numbering on it? Because those chapters are looking like seriously long.
I think it is in somewhere. I think it's at the start of the slides. Let me take a look. Yeah, I put it here by the topic. This is
Topics?
yeah, those topics in part 1, and the topics in part 2 are down here. So yeah, the page numbers aren't there, but that's close.
Okay.
Yeah, these are the official things in the book. I think. That was my plan anyway. All right. Good. All right, I guess we got enough people. Let's do this. All right, so what system ensures the authenticity of public keys? All right, that's the public key infrastructure. What system uses AH and ESP? All right, that's IPsec. All right, how long does an RSA key need to be? (2048) at least. In fact, they're now talking about using 3072 or 4096. Anything else is not secure at all these days. What attack will defeat 2 deaths? All right, let's meet in the middle. All right. And what attack deduces the key from power consumption? All right, that's a side channel attack. All right, good. So let's see. I got Alex J. And I bet that's Caitlin. I'll assume it is until otherwise proven. And D false, good. All right, so we're up to 6:54. Let's take a break until 5 after, and then Dan can give his talk. And if anybody else wants to give a talk, you better send me a chat message pretty soon. I'm going to stop the recording.